Elon Musk has been talking about reaching Mars and building a Mars colony for decades. Though many of his timelines haven't quite panned out, given the rapid progress with Starship at Boca Chica, it seems like reaching Mars is just a matter of time for SpaceX. But how exactly does Elon plan to go from an impressive rocket to a sustainable Martian base, Martian colony, and city? Well, fortunately for us, Elon Musk wrote a detailed 16-page paper on exactly how he envisions the Mars colonization effort. So here's exactly how Elon Musk plans to colonize Mars. Starting off, Elon begins by describing the broad motivations for colonizing Mars in the first place. According to Elon, there's only two fundamental paths for us to take, which are staying on Earth forever or becoming a multi-planetary species. If we stay on Earth, however, extinction is an eventuality. He points out that he has no clue when such a doomsday could happen, and he's not predicting that it's going to happen soon. But given the mass extinction events that have already taken place on Earth, it's just a matter of time, whether we succumb to a massive asteroid or the sun exploding. Considering that Mars is the most similar to the Earth, the logical deduction is to colonize Mars. And the first step in making this possible is improving the cost per ton to Mars by 5 million%, or 4.5 orders of magnitude. Elon goes on to outline 4 aspects that he thinks will allow us to make this jump, starting with, of course, reusability. Reusability needs no explanation. Spending tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions on a rocket that can only work once makes no sense. Starship is hoping to be the first fully reusable rocket that is capable of leaving the Earth, and Elon believes that this full reusability will reduce the overall trip cost by 2.5 orders of magnitude. The second aspect required in driving down costs is refilling in orbit. One of the biggest drawbacks to rockets today is their terrible payload-to-fuel ratio. About 90 to 95% of the mass of every rocket is just fuel. Unfortunately, this is simply what the physics allow for, and there's no easy way to directly improve this ratio. However, by refueling in orbit, we can more or less work around this issue, as the rocket with the payload only needs to carry enough fuel to reach orbit around Earth as opposed to enough fuel to reach Mars. Moving on to the third aspect, we have propellant production on Mars. The reasoning behind this is basically the same as the last aspect. If we can refuel on Mars, we don't have to worry about building a rocket that can carry enough fuel for the entire trip. But in order to produce propellant on Mars, we have to choose the right propellant, and this is the fourth aspect. Apparently, the team was originally a bit confused about which propellant was the best, and they initially thought that hydrogen was the way to go. But they eventually decided that methane was the clear winner, because it doesn't leave any residue in the engines and can be easily produced on Mars. Starship is being built to incorporate all of these aspects, so as soon as Starship development is completed, we can move on to the actual Martian missions. One of the biggest criticisms Elon has received about reaching Mars within this decade is the lack of self-sustaining technology. For example, we don't have a way to quickly grow food on Mars or set up a Mars habitat. Elon's solution for this conundrum is to basically just brute force it. The idea is to just send a crap ton of resources to Mars on cargo trips before humans arrive there. This way, the crew mission itself doesn't actually have to be that self-sustaining. Fortunately, this shouldn't be too difficult given the massive capacity of Starship. Each Starship is expected to carry 100 metric tons of payload to Mars. That's enough cargo capacity to carry nearly 10 years worth of food for 12 astronauts. Currently, Elon's plan is to send the first 2 cargo missions to Mars in 2024. During the actual mission, the 2 cargo starships will be launched into orbit around Earth as the 2024 Mars launch window opens up. After the 2 cargo ships are in orbit, SpaceX will spend the next couple of days launching multiple fuel starships into orbit that can refuel the cargo ships. And hopefully, the cargo starships can take off from Mars before the Mars launch window closes. SpaceX is already gearing up for their first orbital test with Starship right now. So, getting a Starship into orbit and refueling it in orbit in 2024 shouldn't be too difficult. Once the Starships depart for Mars, it should be pretty smooth sailing to Mars. Elon estimates that during the 2024 window, the trip itself will take 140 days. But the main challenge begins once the Starships reach Mars. You see, landing on Mars is extremely difficult due to the thin Martian atmosphere, and landing failures on Mars could delay SpaceX by several years. SpaceX plans to make a hyperbolic entry into Mars at a velocity of 7.5 kilometers per second, and they plan to remove 99% of the kinetic energy aerodynamically. Obviously, this has never been tried before, and the cargo trips will be SpaceX's first attempt at a Martian landing. If there is a failure, there's no choice but to analyze what went wrong and retry the cargo mission during the next launch window. Aside from delivering cargo to Mars, the cargo missions will also confirm the presence of water and identify any landing hazards for the crew mission. If everything goes well, we can finally move on to the first crewed mission. Similar to the cargo mission, the crew Starship will be launched into orbit and refueled there over the next few days. Starship is slated to have a max crew capacity of 100 astronauts and potentially even 200 astronauts eventually. But the first mission won't have nearly as many astronauts. We want to risk as few lives as possible while also having as big of a surplus of supplies as possible. Elon did not outline any specific numbers within his paper, but a reasonable estimate would probably be 1 to 2 dozen crew members. If this mission takes place in 2027, Elon estimates that the trip duration will be about 150 days, which is unfortunately on the upper end of the spectrum. Hopefully, the trip isn't too exhausting though, as the real work starts after the astronauts reach Mars. Once the astronauts reach the red planet, they will need to crack open the cargo ships, locate the closest piece of ice, and set up the propellant plant. Elon claims that methane and oxygen production will be super easy, as the atmosphere is 95% carbon dioxide and there's ice or H2O basically everywhere. The real challenge is powering the production plant. The current solution is to set up a large amount of solar panels to create energy for the plant, but this will likely only allow for slow production, meaning that it will take several months, if not years, to sufficiently fuel up Starship. Elon claims that 78% of Starship's fuel mass is just oxygen, so they don't have to produce too much methane, but the process will likely prove to be lengthy nonetheless. In the meantime, the astronauts will live on the Starship that they traveled on, and potentially start setting up rudimentary infrastructure for a future Martian base. The first mission is definitely more of a proof of concept, so the astronauts won't go too deep into building a Martian base, but we may see them set up things like blastomes to grow crops. They'll also no doubt collect Martian samples and conduct various experiments on Mars. But like I said, their primary goal will be to produce propellant, refuel Starship, and return home safely. Given the thin atmosphere of Mars and its lower gravitational force, the astronauts won't need a booster or need to refuel in orbit. The produced propellant will be more than enough to return all the way back home. And this is when things really get interesting. During the next Mars launch window, SpaceX will be able to send many more crew members paired with a lot more supplies. Elon's end goal is to send 100 Starships with 100 crew members each, meaning that SpaceX will launch 10,000 astronauts to Mars every 26 months. But I doubt SpaceX is just going to jump from 20 crew members straight to 100 Starships. The likely scenario will be around 50 astronauts, or maybe one Starship full of astronauts if SpaceX is feeling really confident. And these guys will be the true pioneers of the new frontier. Unlike the first crewed mission, which was focused on making a round trip, this mission will be focused on actually setting up a large amount of fundamental life support on Mars, which Elon Musk likes to call Mars Space Alpha. This first mission will mostly be completed by SpaceX and their partners themselves. They'll set up more propellant production plants, blastomes, and other basic necessities to make life more sustainable and less dependent on the cargo. Once SpaceX builds up this basic infrastructure, they're open to letting in anyone and everyone who has the appropriate expertise to come to Mars and deploy their own business plans. In other words, SpaceX is going to fully embrace entrepreneurship to build up a Martian city. In the meantime, SpaceX will mainly focus on perfecting Starship and building up the number of people they send to Mars during each launch window. We'll likely see research labs work on building Martian labs, hotel companies working on building Martian accommodations, and countless startups with ideas that we can't even fathom today. According to Elon, there's going to be an explosion of entrepreneurial opportunity. But that's basically as far as Elon goes within this report. He of course has other ambitious plans with Mars, such as terraforming the planet, but that's likely way into the future, as in after 2100. It looks like Elon is really just going to let capitalism run its course on Mars after things are running smoothly. SpaceX's focus will shift to the rest of the solar system, as Elon's final section is called Beyond Mars. Elon describes that this is the primary reason that the other name for Starship is ITS, or Interplanetary Transport System. The idea is to not only use it to colonize Mars, but also explore the rest of our solar system. We could technically set up the same infrastructure on other planets like Pluto and the countless moons orbiting the gas giants. We could jump from Mars to Europa to Titan to Pluto and eventually reach the edge of our solar system. Elon clarifies that he does not recommend using Starship for interstellar journeys. But Elon believes that we can use Starship, or more ideally, an updated version of Starship, to open up travel throughout our solar system. But all of that is way into the future. So, for the time being, it's probably better that we focus on reaching and colonizing Mars first. When do you guys think we'll reach the red planet? Comment that down below.